He shot me because I reached for my phone. He didn't see a mother. He didn't see a federal agent. He saw a threat and pulled the trigger. But what he didn't know was who I really was. I've protected this country from enemies he's never even heard of. And now I'm coming for the system that protected him. They tried to bury me. But you can't silence a woman trained to expose the truth. And when the Pentagon found out what he did, his badge became his downfall. That day, he raised his gun without hesitation and pulled the trigger just because I reached for my phone in the parking lot. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Not today. Not here. The air was cool and dry that morning, the sky smeared with soft gray clouds. I had just stepped out of the grocery store, arms full of ingredients for Malik's favorite dinner lasagna garlic bread and strawberry shortcake. He had passed his AP calculus exam, the last thing standing between him and early college credit. I wanted to surprise him. That was all I was thinking. Nothing political, nothing defiant, just a mother proud and tired living her life in peace. I never saw him coming. A flash of blue, a bark of authority, a hand on his holster. "Ma'am, stop right there." I turned, startled. A white officer, mid-30s buzz, cut hard-jaw mirrored sunglasses was charging at me, weapon half drawn. I instinctively backed up, fumbling for my phone to call someone, anyone. Maybe even just to open the camera. These days, we all knew what could happen. That's when he pulled the trigger. No warning, no command, no chance. Pain shattered my ribs like a thunderclap. My world folded inward as I collapsed onto the concrete groceries, spilling across the ground carton of eggs, cracked strawberries rolling tomato sauce, seeping like blood. I heard people scream. Someone yelled, "Why'd you shoot her?" Another cursed. Someone else pulled out their phone to record. I tried to breathe, but my lungs were drowning in fire. My eyes caught a sliver of the officer's badge, Huxley, before my vision blurred into gray static. And then silence. They told me later I was technically dead for 2 minutes. I woke up in a hospital room with tubes in my mouth, monitors beeping like soft war drums. The walls were too white, the light too harsh. Everything smelled of antiseptic and betrayal. Malik was asleep in a plastic chair next to me, his knees pulled up to his chest like a little boy, not the man he was becoming. I had never seen him that small. Not even when his father died. When he noticed I was awake, he jumped to his feet, face streaked with tears, voice trembling. "Mom, Mom, you're alive!" I blinked, the words sticking in my throat like thorns. I wanted to ask what happened, but I already knew. The question was hollow. The nurse walked in a moment later, face neutral, but eyes warm. "You're very lucky," she said softly. "The bullet missed your heart by 2 inches. You had emergency surgery. We almost lost you." I nodded, slowly, mechanically, and then I whispered, hoarse but resolute. "Why did he shoot me?" The nurse looked away. "They said you matched a description." That was it. Matched a description. By the next day, the story was already being twisted. The news played body cam footage blurred, cut, controlled. They said I was uncooperative. They emphasized I was reaching for an object. They left out that the object was my phone. Officer Chad Huxley was on administrative leave. The footage didn't show the moment he fired. It cut away right before. Convenient. No public apology. No visit from the mayor. Not even a statement from the precinct. Just silence. But the whispers started. She shouldn't have moved so fast. She looked suspicious. She was in the wrong place. I wasn't a suspect. I wasn't breaking the law. I was buying groceries, and I almost died for it. When I could finally sit up, Malik brought me my laptop. "Don't get mad," he said, almost apologetically. I posted something. I clicked on the video he'd uploaded to TikTok. It was him standing outside the hospital, voice shaking. "This is my mom. Her name is Ava Mitchell. She was shot by a cop while walking to her car. She's a cybersecurity specialist. She works for the Pentagon, and she didn't do anything wrong. Please share this." The comments were pouring in. "Wait, the Pentagon. This is why we protest. Name that cop. We want him gone." The views climbed into the hundreds of thousands overnight. I stared at Malik, my brilliant, quiet boy, forced to become an activist because the world tried to erase his mother. I reached for his hand. "You did good." That night I couldn't sleep. The hospital room was too quiet, the whirring machines too rhythmic. In the silence, I began to remember. Not the shooting, the before. Briefings behind closed doors. Handshakes with generals. Coordinating response teams during ransomware threats that could have crippled the national grid. I was never on the news for any of that. I didn't want fame. I wanted service. I wanted to protect. And yet here I was, discarded, like a criminal shot, like a stranger. They didn't know who I was, but they were about to find out. Because if there's one thing I learned from my time serving my country, it's this. Sometimes you have to go silent before you strike. And this time I would strike back not with bullets, but with the full weight of the truth. They thought I was just another statistic. Another black woman shot and silenced. But I wasn't. I am Ava Mitchell, cyber defense specialist. And I did not survive war zones and digital battlefields to be erased by a coward with a badge. The hospital discharged me 6 days after the shooting. I still couldn't walk without assistance. A bullet had torn through my left lung and shattered a rib, but pain was not the worst part. The worst part was the look people gave me now, fear mixed with pity, as if I was broken. But broken things can cut too. Malik wheeled me to the car, his hands gripping the handles a little tighter than necessary. "You're sure you're okay being home?" he asked for the 10th time. "No, but I'm done being somewhere they can monitor me." He understood. He always did. Our home wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. Brick walls, rose bushes out front, and a faded flag I hung every 4th of July. Funny. I used to think that flag meant something to everyone. Malik helped me into the recliner by the window. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge. He brought me my laptop, and then sat on the floor at my feet, legs crossed, like when he was 5. "You know the video got over 1.7 million views, right?" he said, scrolling his phone. "People are angry. Let them be angry," I whispered. "But we need them to be loud and smart." The next morning the doorbell rang. A man in a gray suit stood outside holding a folder. I recognized the posture before I saw the face. Our Reed Carter. He introduced, extending a hand. "You may not remember me. I was a captain in Fort Meade Cyber Unit, 2 desks down from yours." I stared at him. "I remember." He lowered his voice. Words spreading through the defense network. "A few of us think it's time your full story was told." He opened the folder. Inside were photos, classified documents, operation briefs, mission logs. My name highlighted over and over. Ava L. Mitchell, Threat Response Director. Level 4 clearance. He wasn't just reminding me who I was. He was reminding me who they were messing with. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by ghosts. Flashbacks of late-night calls, digital invasions. I stopped attacks I neutralized. I had defended senators and secrets, built firewalls around democracy itself. But none of that mattered to Officer Huxley when he saw my skin. To him, I was a threat before I spoke a word. I pulled up the press release from the precinct. The officer feared for his safety after the subject failed to comply. Subject, that's what I was now. I opened my encrypted drive and copied one file onto a thumb drive. Just one. Project Sentinel. Infrared Recon Overview. Command signed. The kind of operation you don't survive if you're weak. The kind of thing that proved exactly who I was. The next few days blurred into motion. I met with my lawyer, Kendra Voss, former JAG officer, no-nonsense, razor-sharp. She didn't blink when I showed her my files. She looked me square in the eye. Ava, they shot the wrong one. And they're about to find out what that means. We started building. She filed a civil rights suit. We contacted the Inspector General's office. And when she contacted the Pentagon directly with my credentials, the response was swift and deadly quiet. But while the government shifted, the streets spoke louder. Malik had become something I never expected a voice. He was hosting live streams, organizing vigils, partnering with youth activists. He told my story with fire in his chest, and the nation began to listen. He played an old voicemail I left him during a mission in Bahrain. "Hey baby, it's Mom. Just checking in. I'm okay. We're helping stop something real bad. Remember you're my why. Always." That message ended up on CNN. By the end of the week, Ava Mitchell wasn't just a shooting victim. She was a symbol, a patriot gunned down in her own city. The officer didn't know he just shot a federal hero. Why is no one from the Pentagon speaking out? The silence was breaking, because I was no longer just a woman in a hoodie in a parking lot. I was the woman who once led a task force that stopped a terrorist ring from hacking nuclear command protocols. I was the reason a cyber war never happened in 2017. And now, I was the reason a corrupt officer's world was about to collapse. On the seventh day, I stood shaking breath, shallow, but I stood. Malik steadied me as I pulled on a jacket. "Where are we going?" he asked, eyes wide. I looked him in the eye and said, "To the station." Because it was time, Officer Chad Huxley looked into my face again. Not through a scope, not across a parking lot, but eye to eye. And this time, I wouldn't be the one trembling. There's a look some men wear like armor. It says, "I'm untouchable. I make the rules. You obey." That was the look Chad Huxley wore the morning he shot me. And it was the same look he wore walking back into his precinct the next day, shoulders high, chin up, like nothing happened. But something had. And the cracks were already spreading beneath his boots. Huxley wasn't new to this game. He'd been on the force for 11 years, decorated twice, never disciplined officially. But if you scratched the surface, there was rot. 3 complaints of excessive force. 2 racial profiling allegations. 1 body cam malfunction during a chokehold arrest. Every time the report was buried. Every time internal affairs looked the other way. Because Huxley knew how to play the game. He wasn't just a cop. He was their cop. The one who took care of things. The one who always made the right kind of people feel safe. By making the rest of us feel afraid. That week, he sat in a closed-door meeting with the police union rep and the precinct chief. The chief, Harold Brenner, was an old friend of his father, a legacy cop. Pale skin, whiskey breath hands always clasped in fake concern. "You'll be fine," Brenner assured him. "They'll scream for a few days, then move on. These things blow over." "But she didn't die," Huxley muttered. "She's awake," and Brenner scoffed. "We've dealt with worse. She's just another civilian. Stick to the script." Huxley looked out the window. protesters were gathering again, signs reading "Justice for Ava." He clenched his jaw. This wasn't supposed to go viral, but the internet doesn't forget, and the world doesn't stay quiet anymore. 2 days later, Huxley sat at a local bar drinking bourbon and gritting his teeth while watching a news segment. The anchor's voice was calm but cutting. New developments in the case of Ava Mitchell, a black federal contractor shot in a grocery store parking lot last week. Sources now confirm Mitchell worked under the Department of Defense in a high-security role involving cybersecurity and threat prevention. He spat his drink across the counter. "What the hell?" he growled. The bartender, a black woman in her 30s, froze, eyes narrowing. "You're him, aren't you?" she said coldly. He stood up fast, nearly knocking over his glass. "Watch your mouth," he barked. "Watch your back." She shot back and turned away. For the first time in a long time, Huxley felt it. The fear of being watched. Back at the precinct, whispers spread like wildfire. Detectives eyed him differently. One rookie officer, Martinez, refused to meet his gaze. Another, Jenkins, had started locking his file cabinet. Something had shifted. Huxley pretended not to notice, but his steps grew heavier. He pulled aside his partner, Officer Rachel Burns. "We're still good, right?" he asked. She hesitated. "Chad, I don't know what's coming, but you might want to lawyer up." That stung more than he admitted. What Huxley didn't know, what no one at the precinct knew, was that Ava Mitchell had just made contact with an old colleague in D.C., a colonel, a silent friend with a long memory. And behind the scenes, a quiet inquiry had begun through the Office of Military Affairs and Homeland Oversight. They weren't coming to talk. They were coming to take names. The next morning, Huxley drove to work in silence. No music, just the sound of his own breathing. He parked 2 blocks away, paranoid that protesters had recognized his car. He entered through the side door like a fugitive, and when he reached his desk, an envelope waited for him. He opened it slowly. Inside, a notice of pending federal investigation. The color drained from his face. He stormed into Chief Brenner's office. "You told me this would blow over." Brenner looked up, sweating. "I didn't know who she was, Chad. She's got people in high places. Then what the hell do I do?" The chief exhaled, shaking his head. "You pray, son. You hope she settles. And you keep your mouth shut." But Huxley wasn't the praying type. He was the type who fought dirty. And he had one more card to play. That night, he met an old contact, Detective Simon Brooks, retired, Deep Pockets, Deeper Secrets. Brooks had helped Huxley sweep things under the rug before. "Dig into her," Huxley ordered. "There's got to be dirt, something we can leak." Brooks lit a cigarette and gave a cold smile. "That's the problem with good women, Chad. They're hard to smear." Still, Huxley handed over a wad of cash. Find anything. Because to men like Chad Huxley, power wasn't something you lost. It was something you stole back. Even if it meant going to war with a woman who once defended the country from foreign cyber attacks without ever firing a gun. Even if it meant digging his own grave. But while Huxley plotted, Ava prepared. In a quiet apartment in D.C., 2 retired colonels sat down to review a file titled Operation Ironwave. Key personnel Mitchell Ava. The email they sent to the Office of Civil Rights read simply, "She was one of ours. She saved lives. And now we stand with her." And somewhere in a secure Pentagon server, a flag was added to Huxley's file. Subject of interagency review. Priority status. The wolves were circling, and this time the badge wouldn't save him. They say silence is weakness, that those who are quiet have already surrendered. But I've lived long enough to know silence is the sound before everything breaks. And I wasn't weak, I was preparing. After the media frenzy peaked and the protests filled 3 city blocks, the cameras moved on as they always do. The attention turned to the next outrage, but not me. I was still here, recovering, planning. Malik had returned to school, though he carried a different look now. Shoulders straighter, voice. Lower eyes, harder. Trauma makes men out of boys far too soon. I sat at my dining table most days, an old flannel blanket wrapped around my waist, the bullet wound still aching with every breath. But in front of me lay open documents, timelines, FOIA requests, redacted reports, my old encrypted laptop humming beside me. Every night I watched that body cam footage frame by frame. Every freeze of Huxley's gun, every omission, every lie. But this wasn't just about me anymore. The Pentagon hadn't made a public statement yet, but I could feel the shift. A quiet email had landed in my inbox 3 days earlier. "We see you, Ava, and we remember what you've done. COL R.J. Mason." Attached was a satellite feed time-stamped the moment of the shooting. From above. From an asset I didn't even know we had access to anymore. I watched the thermal imaging. My body glowed soft yellow calm. No sudden movement. His glowed orange hot with adrenaline long before I turned. He never felt threatened. He was looking for a reason. Now I had federal-grade proof. Kendra, my lawyer, was working double time. "This isn't just a civil case anymore," she said. "This is about national accountability." She had filed for access to Huxley's service history, including all internal complaints. The city stalled as expected, so she filed a federal motion. And another. They were trying to bury his past. We were going to dig up every bone. In secret, I began reaching out to others like me, not victims, veterans. Black women who had served, risked, protected. We met via encrypted calls, closed Zoom links. There was Danielle, a retired NSA analyst shot during a traffic stop. Rhonda, a Marine, turned VA nurse who was arrested outside her own home for disturbing the peace. And Celeste, a CIA asset whose clearance was revoked after she reported misconduct. Their voices shook with rage. But together, they formed a choir of fire. We called ourselves the Silhouettes, because they never saw us coming until it was too late. I started building the dossier. Not just on Huxley, on the system. A timeline of how Officer Chad Huxley moved from precinct to precinct, always cleared after complaints. A list of internal affairs officers who closed his cases with the same 3-sentence report. A video compilation of body cam clips, other cases where he escalated unnecessarily, barked commands like threats, flexed his badge like a weapon. I edited it myself. I layered it with soft piano under my voice. This is the man who shot me. But I am not the first, and I refuse to be the last. But for every step I took forward, someone tried to push me back. My mailbox was smashed, my tires slashed. An anonymous letter slid under my door. "Drop the case, or next time we won't miss." Malik found it first. He tried to hide it from me. But I saw the panic in his eyes, the rage, the helplessness. I took his hands. "They're scared, Malik. Not of me, of the truth. That means we're winning." He held me longer than usual that night, and I didn't let go first. That weekend, a local newspaper ran a cover story. "From Pentagon to parking lot. Who is Ava Mitchell?" They dug up old photos me in uniform, me in war rooms, me receiving a commendation from Secretary Dawson. The story was respectful, factual, but chilling, because now the public knew I wasn't just a face on a poster. I was a protector, and they shot me anyway. I knew the silence wouldn't last, and I was right. On a rainy Thursday morning, a black SUV pulled up to my driveway. Two men stepped out. Dark suits, cold eyes. I recognized the insignia immediately. Department of Defense Office of Intelligence Oversight. They didn't knock, they waited. When I opened the door, they didn't introduce themselves. The taller one said simply, "You've caused quite a ripple, Ms. Mitchell. The Pentagon wants to know how deep it goes." I didn't blink. I stepped aside. "Then come inside. I've got coffee and classified proof." That night I couldn't sleep, but I didn't need rest, because tomorrow the dam would break. Tomorrow the lawsuit would go public. The names would be named. The evidence would surface. And the badge Huxley once wore like a crown would begin to rust beneath the weight of truth. The storm was coming, and I was no longer its victim. I was its eye. They thought I would disappear. That, after the headlines faded and the hashtags cooled, I'd quietly retreat into my little corner of the world, healed, hushed, humiliated. But they forgot something. You cannot silence someone who has already given everything. And I wasn't hiding. I was waiting. The morning the news broke, I was in my living room, sipping bitter coffee, my ribs still aching from the scar that divided me. Malik sat beside me, eyes locked on the screen. CNN. Breaking Department of Defense confirms Ava Mitchell served as Strategic Cyber Defense Director for Project Ironwave, a covert initiative to thwart domestic digital terrorism. Sources say she received a presidential citation for her work in 2017. The anchor paused, looked directly at the camera. Mitchell is the same woman shot in a grocery store parking lot by Officer Chad Huxley. Questions are now being raised at the highest levels of federal government. I couldn't feel my hands. Malik turned to me stunned. They said your name, your real title. I know. He blinked. You're not just my mom. You're that. Within hours, my inbox exploded. Reporters, whistleblowers, activists, soldiers, survivors. Even a retired FBI deputy director emailed me. What you're doing is historic. You've peeled back the curtain. But I didn't do it alone. The silhouettes had begun leaking everything. Documents, footage, patterns, internal memos that revealed Huxley had been protected intentionally because he was considered a stabilizing asset in minority-heavy zones. Translation, he was good at keeping black people in check. They said it, in writing, and now the world could see it. Chief Harold Brenner tried to respond first. He stood behind a podium, eyes, glassy lips tight. This department is cooperating fully with federal review. We stand by Officer Huxley's record. The crowd shouted him down. A woman threw a copy of the report at his feet. Another man screamed, "She's a war hero, and you tried to bury her." His voice cracked. He walked off stage, and in that instant, power shifted. The next wave came faster than I could brace for. A Senate hearing was announced. Use of excessive force on federal personnel. I was invited to testify. The invitation didn't come through email. It came hand-delivered by 2 military police officers, one of whom used to serve under me in Virginia. He saluted as he gave me the envelope. "Ma'am, it's an honor." I hadn't been called ma'am in 3 years. My eyes welled up, and then came the twist. The moment they never expected. A secret memo surfaced from 2019 leaked by someone inside the precinct. It revealed that Officer Chad Huxley had once accidentally arrested a DEA undercover agent, mistaking him for a suspicious person loitering in a white neighborhood. The arrest had cost the DEA a 6-month sting operation. But instead of punishment, the department sealed the file and promoted him. Why? Because Huxley's father, Commander Ronald Huxley Sr., once donated over $200,000 to the Fraternal Order of Police, PAC. The dots were connecting. This wasn't about fear. It was about privilege. When the Pentagon caught wind of the sealed files, they acted swiftly. 2 colonels and 1 civilian ethics officer were dispatched to the city. They didn't hold a press conference. They called a closed-door meeting with the Mayor Police Chief Union heads and Civil Oversight Board. The next morning, a classified memo was sent to the DOJ signed by 3 generals. Its subject line, Recommendation for Federal Indictment Officer Chad Huxley. Abuse of power, civil rights, violation, obstruction of justice. I stood in the rain that evening, looking out over the courthouse plaza where Malik had organized a candlelight vigil. Hundreds of people stood silently. Some held signs, Black Veterans Matter. Justice for Ava. She protected us, now protect her. And then they projected my old photo onto the courthouse wall. Me in uniform back straight, saluting the flag. Below it, someone had added one line in bold white letters. You shot the wrong one. The next day, Chad Huxley was suspended without pay. The police union issued a rare statement. We do not condone his actions. We support a full investigation. And at that moment I knew he was alone. No one to cover for him. No one to spin the footage. No more shield. Just a man with a gun exposed by the woman he tried to erase. I sat in my living room that night with Malik asleep on the couch beside me. The TV played low. Footage of protesters. Lawmakers debating my case. Veterans stepping forward. And then I heard my name again. Ava Mitchell is not just a victim. She is a veteran, a protector, a mother. And this country owes her far more than silence. I turned off the TV and let the quiet settle. Tomorrow would be war again. But tonight was victory. And I had won it without a bullet. Only truth, only fire, only everything they never saw coming. It didn't happen with sirens. There were no helicopters, no agents kicking down doors, no screaming headlines. When power falls, it doesn't always roar. Sometimes it shatters slowly publicly, piece by piece. And this time the fall began with silence. It was 7:45 a.m. when the black SUVs arrived outside the precinct. No one moved. Officers stared from the windows, like children watching a storm roll in. The moment had finally come. 3 men stepped out, one in a black trench coat with a silver DOJ badge clipped to his breast, the others in Army Regulation Class A dress uniforms. Federal, military, unmistakable. They walked through the precinct doors without knocking, and headed straight for Chad Huxley. I wasn't there to see it in person, but I saw the video. A reporter from the Tribune had tipped off a local streamer. He stood across the street phone, shaking in his hands, streaming live. There was no sound, just the image. Chad Huxley walking out in cuffs. No sunglasses, no smirk, no badge. His hands were shackled behind him. His eyes darted confused and wild as the agents guided him into the back seat of the black vehicle. He said something, but no one could hear it, and no one cared, because the symbol of everything we feared, hated, and endured was no longer above the law. He was beneath it. The video went viral in under 10 minutes. Officer who shot Pentagon veteran. Arrested by federal agents. Justice catches up with Chad Huxley. Mitchell, Vice Huxley, trial to begin this summer. The hashtags lit up again. Ours justice for Ava. Fall off the badge. You shot the wrong one. But the moment that moved me most wasn't the arrest. It was what happened after. That afternoon, I returned to the grocery store parking lot, the same one where my blood had pooled, The same place I nearly died. Only this time I wasn't alone. Over 300 people stood waiting. Veterans in uniform, mothers with children, high school kids holding printed pages of my Senate testimony, a local choir, ministers, activists, even a few police officers off-duty in civilian clothes, heads bowed. A platform had been built over the asphalt. At the center of it stood a podium. They asked me to speak. I stood slowly, Malik holding my arm. Every step echoed through the crowd. Some cheered. Some cried. Some just stared in silence. I looked out across the sea of faces and took a breath. My name is Ava Mitchell. I said my voice even. And 124 days ago, I was shot by a police officer for reaching for my phone. A hush fell over the crowd. I've been called many things since then. A victim, a veteran, a threat, a hero. But before all that, I was just a mother trying to buy groceries for her son. My throat tightened, but they didn't see a mother. They didn't see a patriot. They saw a black woman and they pulled the trigger. The wind blew softly through the mic. And now they're going to see something else. Accountability. The crowd erupted. That evening, the city council passed emergency legislation, the Mitchell Accountability Act. It required body cam footage to be released to families within 72 hours. It banned paid leave for officers under investigation for excessive force. It created a civilian oversight board with subpoena power. And just like that, the system that protected Huxley began to crack. Chief Harold Brenner resigned the next morning. He didn't speak, just packed his belongings and walked out the back. Someone threw a pair of handcuffs at his car. They clattered against the pavement and stayed there untouched. A symbol. No one picked them up. Later that week, I got a message from the Pentagon. Not a press release, not a tweet. A letter, signed, sealed, stamped. Ms. Mitchell, the Department of Defense thanks you for your years of classified service and your recent public courage. In accordance with Joint Congressional Directive 240B, we are offering you full reinstatement or retirement at maximum honors and benefits. We owe you more than this. But this is a start. It wasn't just recognition. It was respect. But I didn't return. I didn't need the uniform anymore. I had already fought one war. This one, the war for dignity. For truth, for my life I had won as Ava. Not as a number. Not as a clearance level. Just Ava. 1 week after Huxley's arrest, Malik found me in the garden pulling weeds. He knelt beside me, dirt under his nails. "Mom," he said, "they renamed the lot." I paused. "What?" He smiled. "The grocery store. They're calling it Mitchell Square. They're putting up a mural of me, of the moment I stood up from the wheelchair and walked into the hearing chamber. Not bleeding, not broken, but unbowed. That night, I stood at my window watching the flag in my yard flutter under a purple dusk. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Not the peace they try to buy with silence, but the peace you earn when you refuse to be quiet. When you make the system hear your name. When you make them remember you were never the threat. You were always the warning. The morning was quiet again. No sirens, no headlines, no chants outside my door. Just the wind rustling the trees in my front yard. And the flag, still flying. It had been 3 months since the trial began. 6 days since it ended. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom was packed. Press community leaders, veterans, strangers who had traveled across state lines just to witness justice rendered. When the verdict was read, the air didn't explode, it exhaled. Relief. Vindication. For the first time, we weren't the ones on trial. Chad Huxley stood there in his wrinkled suit, pale and shaking. He looked less like a cop and more like what he really was. A man, just a man, stripped of his power, his badge, and every lie that had once shielded him. The sentence was heavy, 20 years in federal prison. No parole, civil rights violation, obstruction, abuse of authority with deadly force. But that wasn't what satisfied me. What satisfied me was the silence that followed. No one rushed to defend him. No police union press release. No political pundit spinning the narrative. No Blue Lives Matter banners hung in protest. Just stillness. The system had finally blinked. And in that blink I saw the beginning of something new. I didn't cry when they took him away. I didn't cheer either, because this was never about revenge. This was about removal. Removing the disease, the arrogance, the systemic shield, and maybe, just maybe, planting something better in its place. Weeks later, I returned to Capitol Hill, not as a witness, not as a headline, but as a speaker. They invited me to address the graduating class of cadets from the National Intelligence Leadership Academy. I wore white, not military dress, not tactical black, just white. Symbolic, clean, defiant in its softness. I stood on that stage, the Capitol dome behind me, and looked into the faces of 300 future officers, analysts, defenders. And I told them the truth. Courage isn't the absence of bullets. It's the refusal to stay quiet when one rips through your chest, and the world says it was your fault. I didn't survive to make you comfortable. I survived to make you better. They rose to their feet when I finished. Some clapped, some wept, but none looked away. Back home, Malik had been busy. He'd started a nonprofit with the Silhouettes Project Unseen. It trained young black veterans on how to legally advocate record and protect themselves in high-tension encounters with police and authorities. It also offered free cyber literacy programs in low-income schools. My son, not just surviving, building. He came into my room one evening, phone in hand, grin wide. "Mom," he said, "you're on Time's shortlist for Person of the Year." I laughed. Full and real. I'd settle for person of this house who takes out the trash. He rolled his eyes, but the next morning the trash was gone. We had dinner on the porch that night. Lasagna, garlic bread, strawberry shortcake, the same meal I never got to make on the day I was shot. The table was full. Veterans, neighbors, reporters who had become friends, teachers, even 2 young girls who came to show me their Ava bracelets. I asked what those were. They lifted their wrists, black bands with bold white letters that read, "Don't underestimate quiet." After everyone left, I sat alone, staring at the sky turning gold and lavender. The scar on my side still ached when it rained. The fear still crept in at odd hours. But I wasn't defined by the bullet. I was defined by what I did after it. The next morning, I took the flag off the shelf and walked into the yard. Malik followed, carrying the pole. Together, we raised it slowly, one hand on the rope, one on memory. When it reached the top, I stepped back and saluted, not because the country was perfect, but because I still believed it could be. I still believed we could be. That flag didn't just represent a nation. It represented a refusal to kneel before injustice, a refusal to die quiet, a refusal to let them write the ending. If you're hearing this, if you're living in a world that looks at you like a threat before it sees your humanity, don't wait for permission to exist. Don't ask to be seen. Stand, even if it's alone, especially if it's alone, because the moment you speak, the silence breaks, the badge falls, the flag still flies, and they will finally understand they shot the wrong one. She was supposed to be another silent name in another forgotten report, but she wasn't. Ava Mitchell stood up. She spoke the truth, and the truth shattered everything they built to protect him. They thought they shot a powerless woman, but what they really did was awaken a warrior. In the end, it wasn't the courtroom that brought justice. It was her resilience, her refusal to be erased, her courage to rise again, broken, bleeding, but unbowed. And because of her, the system finally trembled. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun, it's silence. And the most powerful shield we have is each other. You don't need a badge to be brave. You don't need a title to matter. You just need to stand. Speak. Refuse to kneel. Because the moment you believe your voice matters is the moment the world starts to change. If this story moved you, if you believe justice shouldn't depend on skin color or status, then please like this video to help it reach more voices. Comment below. What would you have done if you were Ava Mitchell? Subscribe for more true stories of justice, truth, and transformation. Because the more we speak, the more they listen. And remember, they shot the wrong one.